On today's show, Dallas Mavericks versus Boston Celtics NBA Finals preview, including key players, matchups, storylines, and so much more. How will these two teams square off this upcoming Thursday? It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals that you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Because LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Celtics and Locked On NBA, John Karalis. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Celtics. Now, John, we are getting ready for the NBA Finals, just a few days away here between the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks. So where I want to start with you is kind of revisiting the regular season matchups between these two teams. The Celtics walked away 2-0 in the regular season against the Mavericks. What lessons, if any, can be pulled from those two matchups in the regular season versus this Dallas squad?
Yeah, it's tough to pull anything out of that because regular season is so different than what we're about to see. And you throw the first game out because that didn't involve a lot of the same players. And the second game involved a lot of like everybody was healthy, but the Mavs weren't this Mavs team. So it's hard to say, oh, I'm going to look at this and say, oh, Jaylen Brown covered Luka Doncic or blah, blah, blah. Like there are little bits and pieces that maybe you can pull. But I'm basically starting fresh and I'm looking at who are the Mavs from this playoff run? Who are the Mavs that just beat the Minnesota Timberwolves? What did they do to beat the best defensive team out there? The Celtics are also one of the best defensive teams out there. You don't want to fall into some of the same traps. So I'm more looking at what Dallas has been more recently than anything that they've been in two regular season games against Boston.
Well, on any scouting report, when you're looking at the Dallas Mavericks, the two names at the top of the list, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving. What should be the expectation for how the Celtics try to slow down those two guys in this series?
Yeah, I've landed on you try to play Luka as straight up as possible. Obviously, you're going to throw a lot of different defenses at Luka, right? You're going to have to blitz him sometimes. You're going to have to switch sometimes. You're going to have to play drop. You're going to have to play up the touch. You're going to have to do all of those things every once in a while just to throw the timing off, right? And you try to catch him off balance of like, oh, okay, they're doing this. And you maybe get him to do something out of character. So defensively, I think if you play him straight up, you're admitting he's going to score. You know he's going to score. He's Luka. I kind of want to limit the passing as much as possible. And my pet phrase that I'm going to say a million times over the next few weeks, you defend with your offense and you put him in all of the actions. You make him defend. And there's a lot of talk about how much better he's defending. All right, let's see it. Let's see it. Let's see how he defends and how much energy he's willing to expend on that end. Because if I say he works as hard as he can on the defensive end, and then you come down and you make him do all of the scoring on the offensive end, the hope is that by the fourth quarter, he starts to make a mistake here or there. And all I'm looking for is 5 to 10 possessions in this game where those swing Boston's way and Boston can win the game. And the same thing with Kyrie.
It feels like, yeah, it definitely feels like one of those where Luka, improved defender, sure thing, but it's tough to ask him to do that over the course of an entire 48-minute game as well as carry the offense, especially if you're going to play him straight up, let him score all the points one-on-one. He might get 45, 50 plus, but if he's not getting other guys involved, then that's probably a win for the Celtics. Now, we know that the stars are going to carry this series on both sides, Tatum and Brown for the Celtics, then on the other side, Luka and Kyrie for the Mavericks. Who feels like the Celtics X-factor in this series in your eyes?
I mean, it's easy to say Porzingis, but like, honestly, you can take your pick: Porzingis, Drew Holiday, Derek White, Al Horford. Any one of those guys has the potential. And this is the depth that Boston needs to lean on. It cannot be Luka versus Tatum, Luka and Kyrie versus Tatum and Brown. It cannot be that. Even though you need Tatum and Brown to obviously have big performances, you need all of these other guys. So Porzingis can be an X factor because he's a great outlet offensively for Tatum and Brown, where if you do double them, if you do send extra help that way, they can dump it off to him. He can do a great job. They're going to get, I think, a lot of corner 3-point opportunities, which is where Derek White and Drew Holiday come in. And you're going to ask those guys to do a lot defensively on Kyrie and on Luka. They're going to have a lot of cracks at those two tough defensive assignments. And then Al Horford, when he gets in there, teams have kind of attacked him. What's he able to do defensively? And people have left him. And so if he can hit some shots, Al Horford hitting, 40 to 50% of his 3-pointers can win you a game right there. So pick an X factor. Any one of those guys can be it.
What's been kind of one of the most, I guess, underreported or underrated storylines between the Celtics and Mavericks as we're kind of approaching game one here of the finals?
I think the Mavericks other guys, like, I think there's a lot of talk about how improved Dallas is defensively, but can you play Gafford in this series? How much does he play? And you say, okay, well, no, you just go with Lively. Lively's a rookie. And as great as he's been, you're really going to say, like, oh yeah, we're going to depend on a rookie center to make all of these plays and not get caught up in the moment. Maybe if he does play through it and doesn't get caught up in the moment, then kudos to him. But that's one of those things that I kind of want to see. So I think it's been under discussed how much they rely on those guys, but how questionable they might be against the Celtics, because I think Boston's going to try to put them in a blender. And if Gafford is he's struggled against Boston, maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't, maybe he gets a bunch of minutes and it works, maybe he doesn't. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, and I'm putting a lot of pressure on that rookie, man. I'm throwing every kind of little defensive look I can. I'm trying to trick him into making passes that aren't there, and I'm going to see if a couple of early turnovers can get into his head and have him think like, oh my God, I'm costing us a game in the NBA finals. I've got to do blah, 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 and see if you can't mess with him a little bit. I don't think a lot of people are discussing how taking those two guys out can really be the first domino in kind of breaking down that defense.
When you look at the kind of head coaching departments for both of these two teams, Jason Kidd with the Mavericks, Joe Mazzulla for the Celtics, who do you think has the edge there? Because I've seen a lot of kind of pundits, commentators, everything saying that it feels like Jason Kidd has the edge over Joe Mazzulla, and I don't necessarily think that's the case.
Look, it's funny how a guy is about to be fired and a guy is like the worst coach ever, and then he gets some good players and the players that fit, and he becomes the best coach, and now he's got coaching advantages. I think Mazzulla and Jason Kidd, it's who cares? Who cares? I think Joe Mazzulla is, he was there as an assistant coach. But it's more the guys that have been there, right? Like, it's easy to coach a team and have them prepared for the finals when everybody that is playing in the finals, of your top 6 guys, 5 have been there before, right? And one of them has won a championship. So is that Joe Mazzulla's coaching, or is that these guys kind of being familiar with it? And there are going to be adjustments in the middle of the series, and we'll see. But I think it's more on the players. I'm not looking this as we can call the coaching even if we want. It's more on those guys executing. And I think for Boston, from a coaching perspective, it's the players continuing to buy in to a difficult game plan, because part of the game plan is going to involve getting scored on and not adjusting to the results, adjusting to when the process isn't working. Because sometimes the process works and they score anyway, and that's a hard thing to decipher. If they have full trust in Joe Mazzulla, which I think they do, some of these creative ways that you got to guard Luka, and he beats that repeatedly, and you just got to be like, just keep sticking with it, keep going with it, even though you're taking damage. Keep going with it, because it's going to pay off in the long run.
You mentioned, right, the guys that have been there, right? A lot of these guys having been there as Celtics, right? With this same group, it's changed a little bit on the outsides, right? The support pieces, the depth pieces, all that. What would a title mean for this group, right? For Tatum, for Brown, for Mazzulla, who's been with the Celtics, and even, all the way up to Brad Stevens, right? Running things in the front office.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it shuts down a lot of the narratives. That's for sure. For Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, it quiets all the noise about they can't get it done, which I think is way, way overblown. For Joe Mazzulla, it's a vindication of sorts, because, he gets the job in just bizarre circumstances. They get to the conference finals last year and obviously go down 0-3 to Miami, and that comes off as a disappointment. And Mazzulla has a unique coaching style, a unique philosophy, and it might be tough for some people to kind of latch on to what he's saying. So if they win a title, there's a little bit, and he would never say it, but there's a little bit of "I told you so," "I told you I had this," and like I said, vindication that even though it was under bizarre circumstances, it was the right call. So a lot of people kind of get I told you so. I told you we could do it. It just took some time.
How will the Celtics and Mavericks ultimately match up in the NBA Finals? Who will ultimately take Game 1? You're going to have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Celtics. John, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Got it. Anytime.